Hey there, Wargamers, Justin here, Paint here, and today, boom, I'd like to talk about list building concepts that I go through. I'd like to welcome you guys back to the channel. Thank you for tuning in today. I'm not sure how long today's rant will go, but for those of you guys who are return viewers, thank you so much. If you're new here, welcome as well. For all of you, I hope that you smash that like button like you're trying to alpha strike an enemy unit, like you're trying to send all the firepower downrange. Let's try and channel some of that energy to help the channel grow. As always, if you are new here and you have not hit the subscribe button, I encourage you to do so as well. Let's get this channel going. That said, today, as I mentioned before, we're going to be talking about some list building concepts for unit selection and what goes through my mind when I'm selecting units. And I've got two here that I want to talk about, and hopefully this will help you when you're approaching list building on the master unit list for your list, whether it's casual, tournament play, or somewhere in between, maybe something campaign or narrative related. So let's jump right into it. So what do we have here? So first and foremost, we have an inner sphere, S, medium, and we have a clan heavy, HVY. Looks like clan Y. But there are a few things here that are important to note. These are both skill 4. When I go to start building a list, when I'm looking at units, these are my standard units that I deviate from. Not that every list has to have one, but that their stats and the points are what I am taking into consideration when I build a list. What do I mean by that? First and foremost, 33 points. It's a pretty good point cost. He happens to be a medium, but you're paying 33 points, and you've got 8 HP, essentially. For the clan side, 33 points, 8 HP. Okay? So pretty standard so far. So we've got 8 standard HP. That's pretty well across the board. When we start looking at damage, we've got 332, almost the same, 333. So your damage of an average of a 3. And at the ranges you're most likely to use, at short and medium, 3 range or 3 damage, good to go. Special abilities. There are a few other variants for these that have different special abilities. These are 2 that I grabbed. These are both usable during the clan invasion era, or at least they said that they were. The Bushwhacker was an anomaly to me. Maybe it's late clan invasion. I don't know. But they were both listed as being usable in that area for whatever reason. So you may find other Mad Dogs that actually, you definitely will. I just didn't put them all on here. There are other variants of the Mad Dog that are 33 points that actually have more abilities in different eras. So there's some with Flak, for example. In this case, it's clan invasion. That's a common era that everyone is going to be playing, or most likely to be playing, so this is a place to consider. So in this case, he's got Case and Omni, pretty standard, nothing that you have to super worry about. You're not paying a premium for points based on abilities you have here that you will not use. This guy on the other case, he has Case, that's awesome. He's got Flak and SRM, those are unlikely to come up very much. That is something that is probably baked into his point cost, but considering he's 33 for 8 HP, 332 for damage, and he's 33, 8 HP, 333 for damage, the Flak and SRM don't seem to be calculated in as being much of a point difference, especially considering they both have Case. That leaves the only major difference as being Omni and AMS. So I don't think there's a lot of weight put on these two because they know that those typically use optional rules. Between the 2 of these, the Omni is going to be really good for clanners because it's going to give you a deployment system for battle armor. With the Mad Dog, you're unlikely to want to get in someone's face, but you have Omni so you can carry some battle armor if you want to. The AMS on the Bushwhacker is really good because a lot of units that are rocking SRM, LRM, or indirect fire, he's going to be reducing damage, and that brings me to the next point of these 2 units. Not just damage mitigation, but being hit, TMM2. TMM2. So we're at 33 points, 8 HP, 3 damage, TMM2, right? That's a pretty good number. TMM2 is a pretty good number. For Inner Sphere, TMM of 2 on mediums is pretty common. For clans, TMM of 2 on heavies is very common. When you upgrade to the next weight class for Inner Sphere, going into heavies, that TMM is typically a 1. It's almost always a 1. There are probably some exceptions to that, but probably 90 plus, 95, 98, 99% probably. I don't know for sure, but it's probably true. Of the heavies are probably a TMM1, so like your Warhammers, your Marauders, TMM1, your Riflemen's TMM1. Those are some obvious units that you guys may be looking into. So that is a very common trope. There are a few variants that don't do that, in particular, like Comstar, for example, has a rifleman of a TMM2, and there's a few Dark Age era mechs that break that mold. But in general, that's what you're probably going to expect. Whereas with the clanners, that's not always the case. This is a heavy TMM2. When you drop down to mediums, you're more likely to see TMM2s or 3s, crazy jump jets, much more speed. So there's a big difference between a clan medium and an inner sphere medium. Inner sphere mediums are probably closer to like a clan heavy with what they do, whereas the clan mediums are probably between I don't know, like a I don't know how to describe the clan mediums. They're their own kind of little thing, but that's things to consider. So when I start building a list, first thing that I want to consider when I'm thinking of units, I'm thinking of these things. What can I get for 33 points that's going to give me 3 damage, TMM1, 8 HP? Not as worried about the abilities. That's a secondary thing. But 33 points, TMM2, 3 damage, 8 HP. What can I get? They also both have 10 move. Both have 10 move. So MV10. So these are very similar. Even though I think in Classic, the Mad Dog will probably tear a Bushwhacker up, I would assume. I don't know, but I would assume that's the case. But in Alpha Strike, which is what we're talking about. So, I'm going to go to build a list. Again, starting in my head, when I'm looking at units, what is this unit? What is its point total? How is that point total in relation to these? If it's more than 33 points, so let's say it's 50 points, what am I getting? Is it 50 points? Am I getting more damage? Is it 50 points? Am I getting more HP? Is it 50 points? I'm getting more TMM. Most likely, if it's inner sphere and it's 50 points, probably losing TMM, probably gaining damage. Am I gaining HP? Is the increase in damage output in HP enough to offset the TMM loss and the point increase, right? So hypothetically, let's say you've got 66 points to invest, right, for inner sphere. That means you could bring 2 Bushwhackers, which brings you a potential of 6 damage on the table if they're both alive, and 16 HP your opponent has to chew through, and it's 2 independent units. You could invest that 66 points in one single like heavy mech that's beefed up, and it may have 1 TMM, it may have, let's say, 5 or 6 damage, and it may have like 13 life. It's unlikely to have double. It's probably not got 16. That's like assault class, right? So you've got similar damage output, similar HP total in one unit, which everyone can focus fire on, right? Versus fielding 2 units for similar cost, having 16 HP, your opponent has to dig through independently. If they deal 8 points or more to one and it goes down, you still have half of your damage output still on the table. So when I'm building units, I'm considering, if I'm going up in points, what am I gaining relative to this standard, right? What am I getting for that? If I'm going down in points, it's typically like a light mech I'm going to, or different mediums, and I start to ask myself, what is it do? Or what penalty am I taking to save those points? So I'm going down in points, my HP is going down, my damage is going down, what's this unit's role? So if I'm fielding like a Locust or something and it's got like 2 damage and it's got like 3 life, but its TMM is good, its points are low, that means I have more points to spend on other units and it has a specific job, right? So when I'm going up, it's mostly like, what am I losing for my damage dealers? When I'm going down, it's how many points am I saving to invest in those damage dealers? What can I do to increase their skills or bring more units to the table? So that's a different philosophy going up versus going down in what you're considering. Clanners is much the same. If I'm going up in points, what am I gaining? Now, if I'm going from 33 to, say, 60, that might be the difference between a Mad Dog and a Mad Cat. The Mad Cat, I think, comes in with 12 or 13 HP. I should know this because I just did that video on it, right? And I'm probably, that Mad Cat W, I think, was the one I was using. It came in at, I think, 50-something points. It was TMM 2, 10 move, actually, no, 12 move. I almost caught myself with that one, and I even had that video explaining why I like that unit. It's a 12 move, and it had 770 for damage, and it also had Case and Omni. So for roughly 20 or 22 points more, I was gaining, let's say it was like 12, rough math, so 12. So I'm gaining 4 HP, and I'm over doubling my damage. I'm going from a 3 to a 7. That is still 1 unit with all that damage, though, and what am I giving up to get that unit, right? So if I was to make that Mad Cat at skill 3, I could ostensibly be bringing 2 Mad Dogs to do a similar amount of damage on the table, and now I have 16 HP my opponent has to deal with versus, like, 12 or something like that. So when I start to build my lists, I'm typically going to have a couple of my ace pilots, my damage dealers, and I'm going to have a lot of like jack of all trades in the middle, and not jack of all trades in that they don't have a specialized role, but like the the more grunt units. You've got your forward units that are going to get beat up, like your lights that are going for objectives, your infantry, your tanks and stuff. They may not be there for damage. They're there to push the objectives, to harass your opponent. Let's use an example. So I've talked about this before. We've got the deployment, or the map here. This is 24 inches in on a 4-foot table, right? Let's say there are 3 objectives at the middle of the table. This is just a mock example of what's going on. So I push forward, or I deploy, and I have like a Mad Cat Central. We've talked about, or actually I don't know if the video's gone up, but I do have a video talking about threat projection. If it's not up yet, it will be. So my Mad Cat with the 7 damage is deployed central. Is sitting back, wanting to project out to the medium range. So I drive forward with my lights, my mediums, things like that, harass units straight up to the objectives. These will get me points. Yay! This will kill stuff. Yay! Batch all. Probably spelled that wrong, but whatever, you get the point. So when your opponent goes to fire at you, they have to make a choice. Do I go for your damage dealer that's going to hurt their units, or do I go for these units that are scoring objectives? And usually, if you're trying to play the objectives of the game, they're going to go for those. They're going to weather the storm for him. That's not always. If they can one-shot it, they'll try. That's what you'll do. If you think statistically over time that that will be better, you might do that. But if you push forward with forward pressure, where your lights and things that your pawns that you're not necessarily afraid to lose, your opponent has to deal with them. Let's say this is a scenario where you are playing this, and turn 1 they shoot at the Mad Cat and they fail to kill it, and they don't kill these, and they don't contest, and you get 1 point for holding the objectives. Let's say for math's sake, you're holding 2 of these, and they get 1, right? So they've got an enemy mech over here, right? So on into turn 1, you've got 2, they've got 1 point, right? Going into turn 2, you're up by 1, you have the lead, they still have to clear these mechs. If they ignore you, right, and let's say your Mad Cat's pumping everything into this unit right here, and your other support units, you're focusing the objective. You're not worried about their big cluster of damage dealers here. You're like, if I kill him, I get ahead. Let's say, boom, your Mad Cat axes their bushwhacker. You manage to take them out. So now you're going up by 2, they're going up by 0. This is turn 2, and it's 4-1, right? And for them to make up those points, they got to get 3. They got to get multiple turns with you getting none. And then, so it would take a minimum of 2 turns with you getting none for them to catch up. So generally, if you're playing the objectives early on, in my experience, opponents try to focus on the units on the objectives if they can clear them, and that frees up your units in the backfield. As a clan player, these units in the backfield, if your heavies are where your damage is centralized, you have a TMM of 2, which is really nice. Whereas inner sphere heavies, let's say your marauders, your archers, your warhammers, your riflemen, things of that nature, they're all TMM 1. They could have the same damage as Mad Cat. They could cost the same as the Mad Cat. They could have similar things across the board. They're going to be easier to hit, right? So this is one benefit that the clanners do have. So when you're considering what units to field, you have to determine who's going to be like your damage dealer that's not necessarily pushing the objectives unless they have to. They're the ones that want to eliminate the pawns so that your pawns can score. So you have to consider that. So that brings me to this philosophy here. I field a lot of units in the based off of this average, and the ones that deviate are the ones that benefit from this average. So what do I mean by that? Bushwhacker and Mad Dog. If I'm playing Intersphere and Clan, same philosophy. Let's say I'm thinking about the Bushwhacker as my core or the baseline for what I'm building off of. Let's say I want to bring in a Locust. I get that Locust, let's say it's 17 points. 17-point Locust, right? And then I start thinking, okay, well, what's the difference between a 17-point Locust and a 33-point standard Bushwhacker? That's my baseline that I go off of. And that is going to be, don't make fun of me, 16 points? Yeah, yeah. So 10, it'd be 27, 16. So 16-point difference, right? That's what I saved. Right, in my head, that's what I'm saving. Instead of filling the Bushwhacker, I filled a Locust. I saved 16 points. At 16 points, I can invest in someone else. So now I could field a unit that would be 33 plus 16, 49. Right, because I saved those points. Now, obviously, you still have a set point total. You know, whether it's 150, 250, 350, whatever it is that you're playing. You know, so you still have those point totals to build within, but if you shave points on one unit, it's a little easier to justify spending more points on another, and that's the way that I balance it out. So you can't have all heavy hitters, or your list is one-dimensional and you don't have a lot of units. You can't have all light mechs, because then you don't have damage, and you might be able to try and get objectives, but your casualty rate's going to be high, so you have to find that balance. So the core of my lists will be things like this, and if I deviate, it's because I need lights to be more pawn-like, and that saves me points to upgrade one of these to my more high damage dealers. So if I was building a list for Inner Sphere, typically if I'm playing at, let's say 350, I'm going to start with 12 units. That's what my baseline is, 12 units. And generally, I want to field at least three lights for me. That's one per lance is the way I visualize it. And then anything beyond that is up to me. So I tend to steer away from assaults. And so my baseline is going to be like, how many units can I get that can harass objectives? Lights are to push the backfield, to get on artillery if I need to push objectives early, give them something to focus on while my mediums push forward. So that leaves me with 9 units. So I'll probably generally have like 3 probably heavy units. Or stronger units, right? Maybe one of those, maybe 2 of those have a higher pilot skill, so maybe like 2 skill 3s or 1 skill 2, 2 4s. That still leaves me with 6 other units to put in between. And that's where this is beautiful. So I come in with 3 lights. I shaved a bunch of points with the lights. I can skew a bit more into the heavies with this, and then I still have points here, and I can adjust these up or down to enhance these or get those lower if I need to. And I do the same thing with clanners, except my point totals will be a little bit different. If I'm playing 350, my baseline's probably going to be 10, so I'm bringing 2 stars plus accompanying battle armor. At Bobby's event, he limits you to 2 of any one type of a thing, or any it's not unit type, but like I can only bring like 1 type of the elemental. If I want to bring more than 2 of it, excuse me, I can bring 2 of one type of an elemental. If I want to bring more than that, I have to bring a different type of elemental, a different unit type. So I generally be building 12, but the philosophy is still the same. I'm going to be bringing a couple of light mechs that are toting some battle armor, and those are going to be throwaways like a fire moth or something like that, low damage. So if I lose them, I'm not losing a lot of material. Something I want to drive forward, drop off my my battle armor to harass my opponent, or right back here, right? If you drive forward with these 2 units, and then those 2 units drop off battle armor on top of objectives, now all of a sudden your opponent has to clear 4 units, right? And if they have units here, you've got 4 units shooting them, and they can't ignore you at short range. Like, they can hurt you, and that's cool, but what is it going to cost them? So same kind of philosophy with your light mechs coming forward. And that allows you, with the clanners, like your mediums and heavies, like that category for them is so wide open with great stuff. Like this right here, this is a heavy at 33 points. It's got same stats. Like this is a light heavy, this is a heavy medium. That's why they're so close. This is a 55 ton, this is a 60. That is why. But they're going to do similar things, and because you can bring in heavies, and it, like again, the Mad Cat starts to skew up. You add 20 points to this, you're in Mad Cat territory with double or more damage in similar stat lines. Whereas if you add 20 more points over here on the Bushwhacker, you go into like Warhammer Marauder territory or something that's got good damage, but their TMM is a 1, right? So clanners have a lot of versatility when it comes to the heavy department, in my opinion. They got a lot of good units, but they got a lot of really good heavies. Whereas in my opinion, for the Inner Sphere stuff, you have to be a little bit more proactive of what you're doing with your heavies, because they're kind of glass cannons, right? Whereas their mediums, they have a lot of really nice mediums, chunky mediums. Like again, this guy's a light heavy, this is a heavy medium, but their stats are almost the same. This is very similar for Inner Sphere across the board. Like, if you have some time, you can check out the variants of these, but also for Inner Sphere, check out the Crab. There's some really good Crab variants in the 20 to 30 point range that have similar stats and good HP. The mediums for Inner Sphere, in my opinion, is like where it's at. You have some really good units with good HP and good TMM, so that makes them hard to dislodge. If you lose one, it's not the end of the world. You got, so that's more pawn type nature, more objective pushing, more harassment, more material to play with, and then you have damage spread across the board. You know, it's not all consolidated in one unit. So if your Bushwhacker goes down, oh well, you've got more units. You've got redundancy, right? So that brings me to a philosophy of, when you start using this to build your lists, things to consider. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. If you come to a 350 point game and you bring 5 models, if you're playing an objective-based game, which you should be, if you're only playing kill-based games, it's going to get boring fast, and it favors certain types of lists. You should be playing some type of objective game. If you bring 5 models, you bring a souped-up star of clanner stuff, and at 350, you bring 5 models. I say it's all you bring, which is silly. And you're playing against an Inner Sphere player, and they bring 12 to 16 models, like a reinforced company. you may have the quantity, they will have the quality, and it will be very difficult for you to clear units very quickly, so to stop them from scoring and getting ahead of you. And then if they lose a unit, that sucks, but oh well. When you lose a unit, you're losing so much material, right? So think about how many units you want to play. There's a critical mass. You want to be able to actually maneuver models. Imagine this is like a chess game. And at your list building strategy, when you're building at 350 points or whatever, you're paying for those chess pieces. And you could have a full board, or you could only have a couple of them, right? The full board gives you more options to play the game, right? And that's the way that I look at this. Like, I don't want to just have quality units. I need the quantity because I need to push. I need to be able to play the mission. And that brings me to one other thing to consider when you're building your lists is to consider trading material. It's a philosophy I think players forget. So when I talk about building, right, this is the baseline. I go down, and if I go down, I'm saving points to use on something else. If I go up, I need to figure out where I'm taking those points from, and those units are going to be my damage dealers. On the table, those units, which ones are you willing to trade? If you go forward with your Locust and you lose it, what did you get for it? You're trading those points. Are you going to get those points back? Are you willing to lose those points? I'm more willing to lose a Locust than I am this Bushwhacker. I'm more willing to lose this Mad Dog than I am my 60-point Mad Cat, right? So you have to understand when you're building, each unit has a role, know what you want it to do, understand why you're paying the points you are. Having an idea of what a baseline would be and deviating from that, I think, is helpful, at least for me. And then understanding trading material. When you're playing, what are you willing to risk unit-wise? And if you're unwilling to risk it, is it worth bringing to the table? And if it's worth bringing to the table, how are you going to leverage getting it into position to be used with the rest of your force, which is where the baseline units come in for going up and down and doing list building. I think that is where we will conclude our little bit of a lecture today about my mental process for how I look at units for list building. This is not a full list. At some point, we may obviously go through the master unit list and me build a list and explain what I do. But in this, I just wanted to go over some core concepts to give you guys some thought process on what I think of when I build units and show you the two that I use as a baseline, even if they're not going to be my list. The two that I reference to say, if I'm bringing a unit, how is it in relation to a baseline? How does it deviate? Is it worth the points? If you are paying 45 points for a model that is also 8 HP with 2 TMM with 10 move with 333 for damage, why are you paying those points for that unit if there's another unit that is almost identical and cheaper and does the same thing? Now, I'm not saying you need to max min. What I would say in that case is if that unit you're bringing is way more expensive and brings all the same tools and cost more, does it have a special ability you're paying for and that you want? If that's the case, cool. If it is the case and you don't want those abilities to jack up the point cost, look for other variants. That's one of the things that's a key concept, I think, is like when you look at this and you're like, okay, this model costs more than this. Why? Determine why it costs more. And if you can't figure it out or you don't want to pay the points for whatever it is because you're not going to use those abilities, see if you can find other variants because there might be one that's cheaper that comes back to your baseline and saves those points. That being said, if this was helpful for you, please sound off in the comments below. If it wasn't, also sound off in the comments below and let me know if you think I'm full of crap or if you just want to say anything at all. If you have any thought processes on how you approach unit selection or maybe some baselines of your own, let me know. I'd like to be exposed to some new information. And finally, if you enjoyed this, hit that like button. If you're new here, subscribe. If you want to help support what I do, check out Fortress Miniatures and Games, sponsor of the channel. And if you want to help support what I do, check the links in the comment or in the description down below as well. Picking up paints from Monument Hobbies help support me, and it's also what I use to paint my minis. And if you want to support me directly, I work for Death Through Designs, and contributions there help keep me employed. So, as always, if I don't sign off now, you guys know what'll happen. I'll continue to ramble. So we're gonna go ahead and end it here. Keep baiting those models, guys. Keep rolling your dice, and I will catch you guys next time.